Well, thanks, Holly. Can you hear me okay? Well, between my cell phone, my car keys, and these two microphone thingies, I'm hoping my pants don't fall down during the presentation. Next slide, please. As she said, most people know me in here, know a little bit about me. I got my PhD in 1993, which is now, seems like a long time ago, from, that is SUNY Buffalo. It's not sunny Buffalo. It's not like Philadelphia where it's always sunny. It's rarely sunny in Buffalo, so it's State University of New York. My degree's in social and health psychology, and my research is in stress coping and health, and also in health interventions surrounding various risk behaviors. I have some grant experience. I've had 9 extramural awards directly to me through NIH, SAMHSA, the Pasadena Norte Health Foundation. The CB is the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. For a relatively modest $3 million in total costs, I say that's relatively modest because our next speaker dwarfs me by several factors over. And I want to point out that I've written more than 3 times that number of proposals and submitted them, probably closer to 4 times the number that have been funded, as an indication that you have to be persistent at this game and keep trying. Otherwise, if you give up easily, you won't succeed in grant writing. And I've been teaching grant writing for the last 5 years or so. I'm going to try to cover 2 topics today. One I know a little bit more about than the other, which is grant writing basics and building community partnerships. And I know some of you are saying, your math isn't very good, Joe. You've got 110% there. But that's because that's what you're going to get from me today. Next slide, please. Okay, we went through the... There are lots of reasons to write a grant. A lot of this information is culled from my grant writing class, obviously, and we talk about the different reasons. This list is a little different than I give my students. Grants can do a bunch of things. They can advance scientific knowledge. They can support training activities for students and staff. They can expand opportunities for educating students and clinicians. They can enhance the prestige of your company or institution, or keep it alive financially, I suppose, at certain periods of time. Writing grants can advance your professional career, all those things. Most of you are here probably for these last 3 reasons, which are in bold, because you want to develop and implement some sort of health promotion project, broadly speaking, because you want to provide some needed service to the community, and you'd like to be able to have the funds to do that. A lot of you are here or have been involved in grant writing probably for this last reason, because someone said you had to. Can you go back? Lesson 1 is that grant writing involves a lot of terminology, and even as Eileen was speaking, I was like, oh yeah, I could have mentioned those terms as well. So next, please. Grant. What is a grant? A grant is a mechanism by which an agency awards money to fund a research study, educational program, service program, or a demonstration program. The grant is what you hope to get and then manage, as Eileen was talking about. I've been talking mostly about the proposal process, which is actually a completed grant application. And basically a proposal is a document where you propose to carry out an idea to get some sweet moolah. And as I've gotten older and older, I have to explain my jokes. That sweet moolah comes from Napoleon Dynamite, so I put his picture up there. I talk a lot about grantsmanship when I teach this class. Grantsmanship, and I thought about putting grantspersonship, to be more politically correct. I don't want to be gender biased in my presentation, but I took it off at the last minute for no reason. Grantsmanship refers to the knowledge and skills necessary to put together or complete a grant proposal. So the next term, the granting agency or the grantor, we have to talk about the distinction between the grantor and the grantee. The granting agency is the agency that asks for and receives grant applications. It essentially gives, so to speak, money to projects it deems worthy. And typically these agencies are either a division of government at this local, state, or federal level, or a foundation. Typically, foundations are private sources and government agencies are public sources. The applicant or the grantee is the person or the agency who writes the proposal and hopes to receive the money. And in most cases, this is probably you guys. That's your your job, part of your responsibilities. Next. Different types of grants folks apply for fall into generally three categories. Research grants, which are funds to support specific types of research projects. Education and training grants, which typically support the education and training of individuals, students, or staff, or even faculty in particular fields of study. I have highlighted demonstration projects, which is the category most of you probably have been involved in grant writing or grant managing, or participating, working on grants, or demonstration projects, which are funds to develop or implement and evaluate new innovative programs, or funds to implement and evaluate existing model programs, or sometimes called best practices. Some of you are familiar with most of these terms. Call for proposals, or the CFP, sometimes called a request for proposals, or a request for applications, or a funding opportunity announcement. Whatever they are called, and different agencies use different terms to describe them, they are basically the public notice that there's some money out there, that money is available, and it's an opportunity for you. It typically provides some of the details of the request and what the agency is looking for in proposals. And typically those announcements will refer you to further instructions where you can get more details about what specifically needs to go in. Other terms include the principal investigator, typically on a research grant, or the project director, typically on a demonstration project. And this is the leader or person responsible. This person directs the grant proposal, the writing process, and usually the project itself, if funded, unless you're lucky enough to have a grants manager who can take over some of those responsibilities afterwards. We're going to hear from one of these today, the program officer or project officer. This is the person at the funding agency who directs the funding opportunity. So everything starts typically with a project officer. He or she creates and distributes the call for proposals, provides technical assistance to applicants, coordinates review of the proposals, makes the award recommendations, answers your questions. And I knew Enrique was going to be here, and I said slacks off the other 4 days of the work week. And he left, so I don't know if is he here? Oh, well. We'll hear from him later on. Finally, reviewers, or the peer review panel. These are the people who review and score proposals and make recommendations for funding. So once you're all done, once you've submitted it, once you've completed your proposal, well, these are the folks who look at it. They usually make recommendations for funding, but usually don't decide which ones will be funded. Often the reviewers will score them, provide comments on them, and then a different group or a different committee will decide which of them gets funded. Either a committee or a board of directors in a private foundation make the actual funding decisions. And there's probably more terms. For example, Eileen talked about direct and indirect costs, but one of the things I see with students is all the terms that are overwhelming when you're learning the grant writing process. Okay, lesson 2. Well, if you want to write a grant, you need to find a source of funds. Typically, there are 4 major sources or major categories of where you might seek to find funds to fund your project. Typically, these include federal agencies such as the National Institutes of Health, SAMHSA, the Centers for Disease Control, the Department of Education. These are ones that I typically look for, but in your own area, there may be other federal agencies that fund your type of projects and the things you're looking to do. Another category are private foundations, such as the Paso del Norte Health Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I think it's called the Hoag Foundation. I hope it has 2 Gs. Susan G. Komen Foundation. They fund specific, different kinds of projects. Professional organizations also offer funding opportunities, such as the American Health Association has grants typically directed at curbing heart disease or addressing issues related to heart disease. The American Diabetes Association may have grants funding diabetes. And also don't forget to look at private industry, which also have many grant programs. Even places like Walmart and Target, also drug companies, if you're going that direction, have grant opportunities as well. So typically, when you look at these agencies, the bigger, well, with the exception of perhaps drug companies, the more money you want, the higher you up on this list, or the more money you might expect to get. The bigger grants with federal agencies, then foundations, organizations, and usually the private industry, especially the Walmart, Target size grants, those tend to be pretty small community grants. Well, where do you find them? There are lots of places. Specific agency websites have areas for grants and grant opportunities. Distribution lists from those agencies. It's easy to sign up for announcements. Grants.gov. Just arrow up. Oh, there we go. We used to look in the Federal Register. I'm not sure we look in that as much anymore. Foundationwatch.org is another good location if you're looking for foundation money. And how do you find them? Well, you go on the internet. You know, that's the main place to find grant opportunities, and you can pretty much do it from home. Next, please. A terrific idea that you think is worthy, an exciting project, or something new that you want to do. So that's an agency that might fund that. Some of you, in other situations, may have an existing program that is funded now, or that you'd like to fund to keep it going, that sort of thing. However, you have to be careful here in terms of just funding what you're doing. My experience has been that funding agencies are not particularly excited about giving you money to fund what you're already doing. You know, that's not exciting, not interesting to the granting agency. So you need to, if you're going to try to do that, to try to fund a project that you've been doing for several years and try to keep it going, you really need to spin it, to tweak that idea, to talk about how you might improve that program, how you might expand that program, something to make it new, interesting, and exciting to the funders. Funders usually want to support novel, interesting, and exciting ideas, not things that you're already doing. As good as those things might be, and as much as they are helping people, funders generally want something that they can get really excited about that is new and different and innovative. The idea is not totally up to you either in many cases. You also need to see what the funder wants and is what the funder is looking for with their announcement. Typically, funding agencies have specific ideas, have specific agendas that they want to fund, specific areas they want to go to, and you have to kind of go along with that. So you may have the greatest diabetes self-management program in the world. However, it doesn't stand a chance of being funded if the funding agency is looking for smoking prevention or obesity reduction. It's just not going to happen in most cases. So lesson 4 here, which is kind of tucked in, is that you really need to think about matching your idea to the funder's needs, desires, and preferences. There has to be sort of a dance, a collaboration between you as the grant writer and representing an agency that wants to do certain things, and the funder's aims and desires and goals as well, and you need to match them as much as you possibly can. Lesson 5 is getting to know you. Next, please. Get to know your program or project officer. Again, this is the person who puts out the call for proposals, develops the projects, solicits the applications, and kind of starts the whole process of a grant. And you're going to respond to that call for proposals. So once you've identified some sort of opportunity through a call for proposals, once you've formulated an initial idea, do yourself a favor and contact the program or project officer. Discuss this idea with that person, ask questions, get feedback from that person about your idea and how it fits with their agency, those sorts of things. And most importantly, do what he or she says to do, right? Follow their advice. If that project officer says, we're not funding smoking cessation projects right now, don't write a grant to help people quit smoking. Yeah. Sounds like common sense, but be surprised how often it doesn't happen. If that project officer says, well, we're looking for innovative approaches to physical activity promotion, say, hey, that's just what we're doing. Even maybe if you're not at that point. But find out what what they're interested in doing, and you know, mesh your idea, try to match your idea to what they're doing. So a good idea, in other words, is a fundable idea, is often a collaboration between the grantor and the grantee, some sort of dance that you do with them to try to come to some mutually agreeable project that fits everyone's needs. Next. Lesson 6 is follow instructions. I have 5 suggestions for following instructions, which are follow the application instructions, follow the application instructions. Yeah, you get it. You also need to follow instructions at several levels, not just the, you know, certainly you should read the instructions that come with the application packet once you get it from the call for proposals. Usually be careful, because often announcements or opportunities or applications will include general instructions for all grants for an agency, but then there may be specific or supplemental instructions that go for your specific area that you're applying for your specific call for proposals. So make sure you find all of the instructions and follow all of them. Pay attention to the minutia. Even the minutia is important. Things like page and word limits, font size, sections that the funder is looking to be included in the proposal, topics that should be covered, budget restrictions too. Make sure you know about all those things, and when you send your application in, you followed the instructions. Finally, and just as a reminder, any information you've gotten from the project, the program officer, the project officer about your project, any feedback you've gotten from them, certainly make sure you follow those suggestions. This came up a little bit at the end of Eileen's talk, and I was glad to hear some comments in that direction, because I think it's just as important as some of the comments that were said are. Lesson 7 is, yes, it does involve writing. Kind of like, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. One thing you need to know, if you don't know this already, and I don't mean to insult anyone in this audience, but you do need to know that in certain circles, the written word sends a message. As a grant writer, as someone who's preparing a grant, your proposal and the words you write will allow grant writers to evaluate your proposal based in part on how well it's written. You can't read a proposal and, if it's poorly written, not take notice of that as a reviewer. Also, how the proposal is written, and not just the proposal, we mentioned even cover letters, all of those things, the whole packet. How the proposal is written reflects your competency and ability to carry out a proposed project. Right? If your proposal is filled with errors and inconsistencies and is sloppy and has 12-point font here and Arial and Times Roman down below, and it's indented here and not indented there, and it just looks sloppy, well, the granting agency is going to say, well, are these people capable of doing this project and doing it well, or is it a general reflection on how the agency works? So don't forget that that notion of sending a message. Also, just generally, as professionals in the community, people will evaluate you and respect you to a certain extent based on your ability to write. You want to know, will they think of you as educated, conscientious, and careful, or think of you as, and I left the blank because I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. You can fill it in for yourself. There's always good news and bad news associated with writing. The bad news is that for many, writing is difficult, hard work. It's tough to write well. To improve, you have to make a commitment to improving your writing. It's not just something you can wake up and take a pill and all of a sudden your words flow and your sentences make sense and your organization improves. You have to make a commitment to better writing and work hard at it. The good news is that poor writing is a curable disease. It is something you can change. Writing is a skill that can be developed and improved. You may not become Jonathan Franzen or John Irving, but you can become a competent writer no matter what your level of inherent ability through hard work and persistence. So How to go about improving your writing. Number one, expect to write multiple drafts. The first draft is never very good. Improvement in writing comes only through continual writing, critique, and rewriting. This is true for even simple documents, cover letters and personal statements. I tell students, don't ever send any application out to a graduate school or a job where someone hasn't reviewed it and looked it over and given you feedback on it. Writing multiple drafts and getting feedback can be painful because we like to think of ourselves as smart and we work hard on things and then we get it back and it has red marks all over it. And it can be a painful process, so I do acknowledge that. Next. Have someone review your work. Preferably someone who's a better writer than you. As a bit of unspoken advice. Criticism can be painful, but it's, no matter what, it's always better afterwards. It's always better. Pick someone who's a good writer. Remember, your task is conveying, especially in grant writing, your task is conveying complicated information to an audience. As much as your idea and your project and what you want to do makes sense to you, to someone who doesn't know what you're doing, what you've been doing for years, it's going to be complicated. And explaining what you hope to accomplish, what you want to do, is complicated. So do yourselves a favor, such as using simple and plain language. This is a big error that I see in student writing. Don't assume that the reader knows what you're talking about. Explain as much as you can everything that is new, novel, that you even think there's any chance the reader may not understand. Explain everything. Don't assume anything. It happens a lot with students and instructor relationships because oh, well, he's a professor, he's smart. They obviously don't know anything. But they think, well, he'll figure it out. That's why he's got a PhD. No, I can't figure it out. This is some advice that I generally give to students about writing. Write so that your mother could understand it. If your mother can read it and have a general idea of what you're trying to do, then you're writing at the right level. And I attribute this quote to Darrell Bem. Good writing is like good teaching. Right? So you want to lead the reader. You want to tell a story. And don't forget that that's what you're doing. Next. Other advice for ensuring your proposal is wrote good. Obviously, use complete sentences with proper spelling, grammar, punctuation. Organization is key. Make sure your proposal is well organized. And the nice thing about grant writing generally is that much of the organization is there for you. The agency typically in their instructions says address these issues and these questions, right? And they typically have an order to them. And I'm not sure it's always explicit that they say address these items in this order, but you could just assume that that's the order they want them. So don't get creative with the organization. The organization is generally there for you. Follow what they want. If they want 8, I've noticed the foundation proposals from the Paso del Norte Health Foundation usually have like 9 sections, I think. Organize your material in 9 sections and address those issues in those sections. Don't get creative. So, however, that doesn't mean you're off the hook for organization. Often the material within each of those sections needs to be organized. So you may have a background section. You need to organize the background well. So, use plain and simple language. I think I mentioned this earlier, but often I find the situation where people say, well, if they think I'm smart, they're more likely to give me the money. So I'll try to sound smart in my writing by using lots of jargon and complicated terms and big words. And you write a nice sentence, and then you go through the thesaurus and you say, well, I'm going to pick a bigger word for this and plug it in so it looks like I have an IQ of 150. Generally, the more you try to sound smart, the dumber you'll sound. So keep it simple. Again, write so your mother could understand it. Implicit in that is also repetition. I've said at least twice now, write so your mother can understand it. It's okay to repeat yourself and remind the reader of where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish. Don't expect the reader, the grant reviewer, to remember everything you said on page 1 by the time they get to page 4. So don't be afraid to remind and use reminders and summarize and repeat things that are important, especially if you want them to get across. More advice for good writing. You should. This is something that students often have a hard time with, which is self-promotion and selling the idea. Often we don't want to be boastful or brag about our accomplishments. We want to be modest, and that's a good social grace, but often not a good advice when you're talking about grant proposals. You need to, if you think you have a great idea, you need to say so, and the enthusiasm for it needs to come through. You need to present a compelling case. In a lot of ways, your job is to convince the agency to support this idea. It's a form of persuasion. You're making an argument, and so you want to present good arguments for why your project is the right one, why it's good, why it's sound, why it's based on lots of research and likely to be effective. And grant proposals are generally, now you can go overboard, of course, I don't want to push you too far in the other direction, but generally grant proposals are not the place for modesty. Finally, grant writing is a form of technical writing. It's not creative writing. It's a whole different style altogether. Technical writing can be dull, but it doesn't have to be. You do not have to write in the passive voice. Use the active voice. Make it flow. Make it zip. Give it some zoom. Also, and many of you have seen this before, and you're like, oh my God, again with this Strunk and White. You should purchase this book because it is the best $10 you'll ever spend. It's about 100 pages long and a great guide to grammar and style. So get that book. I didn't know what to say about budget when I was putting this talk together, because the budget in a lot of ways is one of the hardest tasks to put together, and we could probably spend a whole session on what you need to do to include a budget. So I have just some very general instructions on getting a budget, trying to get some sweet moolah. Read and follow the instructions, obviously, especially as concerns budget. Know the limits. Some certain calls for proposals, certain applications, certain opportunities have a limit on the funding. Not more than 100,000, not more than 50,000, not more than 300,000. Some do not. Some do not. What do you do if you don't know the funding limit, or don't have any idea as to what the kinds of project prices that they're looking for? What should you do? You should ask. Call the project officer, and he or she may say, well, we don't have a set limit, but that officer will also say, we expect projects to be in this range. That's likely to be kind of what we're looking for. And so you might get a range out of a person. So then what do you ask for? Then how much do you ask for? What you need. Yeah, I've got two people coming in at the same time. Ask for what you need. Don't ask for the maximum necessarily. Don't pad your budget. Don't ask for excessive amounts if you don't need them. Ask for what you need. Should you ask for less than what you need? Why not? Yeah, agencies will recognize this. If you don't ask for enough money, that suggests you really aren't sure about what you're doing. A lot of folks think, well, if I only ask for a small amount of money, they're more likely to fund it because I'm affordable. Kind of that, given a choice of two brands of, I don't know, dish soap, which one are you going to pick? The cheaper one? They think that might guide the choice of projects as well, but typically not. If you don't ask for enough money, if you don't ask for sufficient funds, they're going to wonder about your ability to carry out the project, and do you really have an idea of what these things cost? So always ask for what you need, again, within the limits. Know about overhead rates. I didn't talk much about this earlier, but some agencies allow certain rates of like NIH, I think, is like up around 49% these days. Whereas things like the Paso Norte Health Foundation is I think 12%? It's 10 or 12%, I don't remember. And again, that facility is an administrative or overhead. Indirect costs, I think is how Eileen referred to it, is just money that goes to the host agency to provide your lights, your electricity, your space, your facilities. But you need to know those rates before you make your budget. And again, research your home agency rules. Some of you, people in this room come from agencies of varying complexity. Some of you come from very small organizations where there may not be very many rules at all. Some of you come from very complicated agencies, and there may be rules about lots of different things. Overhead rates sometimes come from your home agency. Your agency may have salary limits for different classifications of people, different rates for mileage. So you need to know your own rules as well, or know that you don't have a whole lot of rules. Next, please. Some general budget considerations. You certainly want to know, is the budget practical and realistic? We talked a little bit about this earlier. Are you asking for the correct amount of money? Is the money you're asking for likely to produce the outcomes that you want to achieve? Is it realistic? Is the budget appropriate? Have I asked for the correct amount of money? Again, asking for too much or too little can hurt your chances for funding. Does the budget cover all your anticipated costs? And this is tough when it comes to budgeting, because it's kind of like putting together your grocery store list. You always think you have everything on your list, but you get back from the grocery store and invariably you go, I forgot some whatever. And that's it's even tougher trying to think about, well, what am I going to need 6 months from now? How many pencils am I going to need 6 months from now? And so sometimes I wish we could just look into a crystal ball and know, well, we're going to need 300 pencils by that point in time. So it does require quite a bit of estimation. Go ahead. Lesson 9 is know that you're not alone. Although grant writing can be a very lonely and solitary job, you hide away in your office or your desk somewhere and you just pound away and put things together. It doesn't necessarily need to be like that. You can build a grant writing team. Recruit your colleagues and friends. Again, pick out your friends who did really well in school and who you get along with and who have skills, because Napoleon said it's always good to have skills. And try to assign them tasks and choose people with different skills. You may have certain folks who are good at putting together budgets, and you might have them draft your budgets. You may have folks who are really good at editing and proofreading, right? And so you'd want those folks to be your proofreaders, to be your editors. Some folks are really good at library research, doing some of the background information and putting it together. Some folks are really good at going out and getting those letters that you need from partnering agencies or collaborators on your grant. So send those folks out to get the letters. But break up the work so that it's not so overwhelming and you have some help. However, be careful. Just building a team doesn't mean a grant is going to happen. Someone has to make sure that the whole package paints a consistent picture. Charles, this is the older folks in the crowd will recognize this is Charles, in charge of our days and our nights. Charles or someone equally capable needs to be in charge to pick up the slack where others fail to meet obligations or expectations. And usually this is the PI or the project director, depending on the kind of grant you're writing. Someone needs to take responsibility and just do it occasionally, because it's, and also you don't want your grant, you don't want your proposal to have 4 different, okay, you take section 1, I'll take section 2, you take section 3, and they're all in different fonts, different writing styles, different citing styles. They'll know that it was pieced together, and it won't be a nice, consistent application. It'll look disjointed. I was trying to end on a good note with lesson 10, but I didn't know where else to develop a thick skin. Go ahead. The funding environment is very difficult and extremely competitive. Only a small percentage of proposals are funded. By last estimate, sometimes 15%. Right? So your chances starting out are not very good. You're better off going to Vegas, you know, and throwing it down on a blackjack table. Of course, you have a chance of losing money at Vegas. But anyway, you need to not take rejection personally. Think about it, you're the norm. You're like everyone else. Everyone else is getting rejected. So develop a thick skin about rejection. Remember, I've written at least 3, perhaps 4 times as many grants and submitted them than have been funded. So at that rate, I guess I'm still doing better than 5 to 15% over my lifetime. But we'll see. You never know. If you're working with certain agencies provide reviews. One of the nice things about most of the federal government sources is you get feedback on your proposal, which is nice. At least if it's rejected, you know why. That unfortunately is not always the case. Some agencies, a lot of private foundations, you just get a letter saying, sorry, we're not funding your proposal. Thank you for your time and effort. And that can be very frustrating because it'd be at least, you spend a lot of time and effort on a grant proposal. It'd be nice to know what they liked or didn't like. As painful as that can be, it's still better than no information at all. But if you are working with an agency where you get reviews and where there's the opportunity to resubmit, do it. Read the reviews quickly, one day, go out, hit some golf balls, punch some walls, be mad, get it out, come back the next day and read them again when you've had some time to put some perspective on it, and be willing to revise and resubmit. Most, especially with federal agencies, most grants are not being accepted the first time around. You have an opportunity to resubmit. Do that. Be willing to do that. Okay, that's section 1. That's 85%. The last part of my talk is about building community partnerships. And I have here lessons from a hermit, in part because although when I kind of look back at my record and things I've done in the last 15 years or so, I have partnered with a lot of agencies, or at least a significant number, but I don't feel like I'm that kind of person that goes out into the community. I've kind of been dragged into it here and there, and I guess I do it, but I just don't have that self-perception of being someone who's out there in the community. But I'll tell you what I can. Building community partnerships, how to get a partner, I think the biggest thing is to ask. As simple as it may sound, I've gotten involved in grant writing projects at many levels, from writing most of the proposal to collaborating on a part to doing the evaluation, mainly because someone from a community agency asked me. Right? I'm sitting in my office at UTEP, and I get an email or someone knocks on my door saying, hey, Dr. Tomaka, do you remember me? I was in your class 3 years ago. I'm working at so-and-so. Would you like to help us out with this grant in some way? And I'm like, if I can, I'm like, yeah, sure. So you have to ask. I won't go. I generally don't go looking for these opportunities because I've got, with Holly and all the students, it's just a pain, and I've got so much going on. But I've had several partnerships with me as a university. I've worked with the 65th District Court. I've worked with the YMCA. Most recently with the Echelon Group, and we have a representative from the Echelon Group coming up next. The YWCA, and there are a few others that I couldn't remember, but I've worked with them on successful proposals and proposals that were unfortunately not funded, but there are more. I have realistic. When you start thinking about developing partnerships, I think you need to be realistic in the sense that most people have limited grant writing experience. It's the rare case that you run into a partner and you're going and asking around that you're going to find somebody that has a lot of experience. So just be realistic that you might need to coach, you might need to find other technical assistance from folks as well to help you put together that project. in that case, and especially in that regard, do some research and find an expert. Find someone who's got some grant experience and see if they can help you out. Again, we have Rita Arnett coming up as our next speaker, who's worked with lots of different agencies, most notably Aliviane, but among others. And she's a true expert in grant writing. And so if you can get her help, yeah, she's going to get flooded with, I hope you brought business cards. That'll work out well. Same, I guess the same with me. I've had a lot of grant experience. Find someone who has a lot of experience and ask them to help you out as much as they can, especially if they're going to be your program evaluators or something like that. Next. This is a little bit of a, should be obvious, but doesn't always work out that way. You should treat your partners well. Too often, in my experience, the agency works with a faculty member, and it's not just my experience, but it's other folks I know, or an evaluator, to produce a fundable proposal. Right? Everything goes well at the proposal phase. Everyone's happy. The agency receives an award. And then, unfortunately, and this is not always the case, but this does happen now and then enough that I mention it, the agency wants to reduce the role or eliminate the partner. Sometimes this is because they want greater control over the evaluation itself. And again, this has usually been in my role as program evaluator when it has happened, which is not the majority of times, but it has happened. Or they want greater control over the evaluation budget because they want to give that contract to their high school buddy from many years ago. It happens. But this diminishes the enthusiasm to work together, and everyone loses. Things like this happen, and my willingness to work with some agencies is much diminished because things like this have happened. So treat your partners well. Next. Partnerships are just that. Partnerships with mutual respect, with equality, and where all have active roles, produce the best outcomes. They foster a collaborative environment. They prevent misunderstandings, and they allow for program improvement and better service delivery all around. So partnerships with these qualities benefit everyone, including the people we are hoping to serve with these projects. Again, most of them are demonstration projects that we want to provide some service to the community, and we want to do it well. I have some acknowledgments. I'd like to thank this Health Disparities Research Center for inviting me today. It's been my pleasure. I'd like to thank the students who've given me feedback and endured my grant writing class over the years. I've used this Gitlin and Lyons textbook for a long time, Successful Grant Writing, which I find an odd title. It's a much improvement to their 2004 version, which was Unsuccessful Grant Writing. No, that one didn't sell as well as this one. I'm just kidding. Anyway, that's what I have. Any questions? Yeah.
My experience so far has been that I think a lot of people expect to do a lot of technical writing as part of the grant writing process, but there's also a great deal of narrative writing. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the key differences and maybe some of the stronger points of good narrative writing?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't draw a strong distinction between technical and narrative writing because I think they both need the same qualities of good organization. When I talk about organization, certainly grammar, punctuation, those basics. But above that level, you got to think about a couple of things. Mainly, organization of the material is key. The material needs to be well organized, and I talk about both within the paragraph organization and between paragraphs. So when you think about a single paragraph of text, right, I tell my students, one idea. Don't try to convey 4, 5, 6 ideas in a paragraph. Keep the paragraph simple, even if they're short. Convey one idea, move on to the next. Right? And use that paragraph then as a building block so that your paragraphs lead and follow from one another. So, generally with organization, if it's a background section, you want to start general and move to specific things. Don't be afraid to remind your reader of things. Don't assume that some of these things I covered. Don't assume that the reader knows what you're talking about. Explain your terms. and tell a story. I mean, that's, it's not that different from creative writing in that sense, that you've got to tell your story of what you want to accomplish. And it may be technical because it involves certain technical aspects, but it doesn't have to be dull, but it needs to be well organized, and have a logical flow to it. And again, get feedback on it, of course. Yeah.
As you said earlier, most of the federal and state applications have limits and they spell everything out for you.
Mm-hmm.
With foundation requests, even before the application, you find some that say, please submit a short, or some that say a medium, or some that say a detailed summary of the program. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen everybody write from maybe a page
Mm-hmm.
to up to 20 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the 20-page ones get funded, some of the
Sure.
two-pagers get funded.
Mhm.
What's a reasonable amount of writing when someone asks you for that?
For a
grant?
brief idea?
Yeah, for a brief idea.
I mean, I would say that you probably don't want to go more than 2 or 3 pages. We call them concept papers when I teach the class. You only want to develop a concept paper. Concept paper helps you formulate your own ideas as well, and then you can use that, for a. Sometimes there's a letter that they want, or a brief explanation. You can kind of borrow from that concept paper. But I would say, if they want something relatively short where they can get an idea of what you're doing, they don't want to wade through 20 pages. Yes, some of those may get funded, but 2 or 3 pages at the most is probably enough for a letter of interest or a concept paper, and that 3 is getting to be quite a bit. Some of them may be shorter, but that would be my limit. Yeah.
Just a thought, especially for foundation, they don't always tell you the giving guidelines. So if you can research and figure out what they've given the first year of funding to an entity, the second
Mhm.
year of funding to an entity, that type of thing. Then although you're asking for what you need, of course, you're also asking for something that realistically can be funded.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of I understand the agencies not wanting to say, well, here's the limit, because then everyone will ask for the limit. I think that's but you still need some sort of range. And so past years, if you can get a hold of what they funded in the past for similar projects, that will help you as well in terms of figuring out where should I ballpark my project. Because if they're looking for projects in the range of $200,000, even though it's unlimited, if you say I need $1 million for this, you're way off. So yeah, good. What else? Yeah.
Would you suggest, even if the funder doesn't explicitly say it, putting in a logic model, just to go like with a letter of intent or with the grant? Just because we're going through so many that just to get a broad overview.
I think I'm a big fan of any visual aids, so logic models or theoretical models, tables, figures, those sorts of things. When they're done well, I think they're great aids and can help a proposal quite a bit. So I'm saying, I guess I'm saying yes. Even if they don't ask for it explicitly, the only concern is sometimes that that may take a whole page, and if you have 6 pages for an application, like some of the new NIH proposals, you have to balance that against that. But yeah, so yeah.
As our professor, outstanding discussion.
Oh, thank you. They always love me when then the grades go in, and yeah, that was okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Let's say you're working for an agency that works with multiple grants on one project or a couple of projects. When you're applying for a grant, do you tell them that you're already funded with something, or you go from the sense that it's a whole new project?
A couple of things. One, some agencies want to know what your current, so especially the federal agencies, they want to know what your current projects are. So you do have to detail that in some part of the proposal. I would say, it might be good to say what projects you have going on, which is a strength if there's a place for it, because they want to know that you're familiar with projects and that you've handled them before, you've had grants, that sort of thing. So I think yes, I'm going to say especially if there's some overlap with the project. That's if you're going to be funding, asking for funding to provide a grant supported, an activity supported from another grant to another 150 kids, you certainly want to be clear about how that will happen and detail, and make sure that the money you're asking for is going to cover new things, not pay for old things. I think it's called non-supplementation of funds. Yeah, you don't want to, you don't want to backdoor pay for another program through a new program. It should be, funders expect that you're going to use their money to fund something explicit. And that may be part of a bigger program or something that's ongoing, but you just need to be very clear about how it will, and that you will not mix the funds for those sorts of things. Another thing related to that is sometimes people say, well, can I submit the same project to multiple funders at the same time? So I may go Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and Paso del Norte Health Foundation with the same idea, right? Is that okay? In general, I think that's okay. I don't, you can submit them to two agencies. Where you need to be careful is if one gets funded or if both get funded, yay, good problems. You probably need to sit down with the officers of both of those grants and say, okay, how can we make this project happen as a joint venture or expand it or contract it so that each one knows that you're not double, you're not getting double funded for the same activities. But that is a good problem. So, what else? Bless you, Ben.
Can you talk a little bit about matching funds?
Yeah, I thought about whether I should talk about that. A lot of, I don't know if a lot, but some agencies want you to have matching funds or, what's the other word for it? I'm blanking. Matching, shared costs, that sort of thing. What do you want to know about it? That means they're expecting you to put up some resources, and then they will you put up 30%, they'll try to cover 70% of a project.
There's two kinds of match, in kind and cash.
Okay. Yeah. In kind is a little bit easier to come up with for most folks. So you can say, well, I'm going to devote 50% of your salary is going to be devoted to the project, and that'll be in kind. Versus cash is you actually got to come up with real money. Yeah. So my advice for in kind is to be creative, certainly, and honest. If I'm going to say 50% of your time is going to be devoted to this project, it does need to be. You do need to spend those hours toward that project. But space, facilities, supplies, that sort of stuff can all count.
But also, if your time, that 50% is being paid for by another grant agency, you can't take their monetary commitment.
Yeah, that's the non-supplementation, double dipping sort of. Yeah, you need to be employed by your home agency in order to kind of devote that stuff with independent funds. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you for your presentation today.
Oh, well,
Because
you're welcome.
I'm new at this whole grant writing thing.
Uh-huh.
And last year I wrote about 8 upon request of my director.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't receive any money at all.
Uh-huh.
But you've given us hope.
Oh, good. I wasn't too negative. I'm teaching grant writing in the fall. So Health Science 4312 if you want to get the full version of this presentation. I tried to cram a whole semester's worth of information into an hour and 15 minutes. Actually an hour. I'm fast. Okay, well, thanks.